Welcome to Holy Fire Hebraic Center. We'll continue our teaching series on today we'll cover Kavod. So shall we begin? Go ahead.
Kavod. What is the glory of Yah? What does it mean to give him or glory? Can we even do that? What does his glory look like? Do the pictographs in the word kavod reveal hidden insight? And will anything in this word point us to Messiah? Let's find the answers to these questions. In chapter 7 of the book of Joshua, in our ancient text, there is recorded for us the account of the one who, by disobeying Yah, brought a curse upon all Israel. Before Achan is stoned to death for stealing from the spoils of the conquest of Jericho, Joshua says this to him in verse 19. And Joshua said unto Achan, My son, give, I pray thee, glory to the Elohim of Israel, and make confession unto him, and tell me now what thou hast done. Hide it not from me.
Okay, so we continue to look at the book of Joshua for references to some of these words that we're studying. Why do you think we're looking at the book of Joshua? Because these words are throughout the whole Torah. Why the book of Joshua? Anyone? Kat?
Because I finally have left Egypt behind and they're headed into their future.
Yeah, I think exactly that. This was a transformation time for them. They had spent 40 years in the desert going through sanctification. The old generation had passed away. The new generation had now been raised up, and had been raised up to follow Torah. And one of the physical aspects of that was the very first lesson they learned was what? What's the very first lesson that Israel learned in the desert? Shabbat. The very first thing they learned was Shabbat. Because he told them, for 6 days, gather. On the 6th day, gather twice. But on the 7th day, no. And if you gather too much, what happens to the too much?
Lots.
The worms would come and eat it, right? So the very first thing that Israel learned, very first thing Abba Father taught them, to honor the Shabbat. And that's what we're doing here today. We're honoring the Shabbat. So it must be important to him that he chose that to be their very first lesson. The other thing that they learned, what was the second thing that they learned? When the cloud moved, they moved.
I'm thinking obedience too.
Well, in the process of doing these things, what was he teaching them?
Obedience.
To obey his word. Amen. That's one of the things that we're striving to do right now, right? We're striving to obey his word. Not just to listen to his word. Remember, one of the teachings on Shema is what? Hear and obey. Not just hear. See, most of us hear, but it's harder to obey, to put it into practice. So the second thing that Israel learned to do was follow the cloud. If the cloud moved, they learned if they stayed there, what wouldn't they have? No more manna. No more, they had to have water, right? And protection. There was no protection. The cloud symbolized his presence. So wherever he was, that's where their provision was. That's where their protection was. That's where we need to learn to be. The other thing it says is not even their shoes or their clothes wore out during that time. So we just need to understand he's trying to teach us even something here today. So part of that was glory. So when they went in, one of the towns, the first town they came to was Jericho. which was one of the largest cities in what we're now called Israel, or the Promised Land, or the Eretz. And this town was fortified with a wall that it says the wall was so wide that 2 chariots could race around the top. You know, June and I have been blessed that we were there, and you get to see Jericho. Guess what Jericho looks like today? Pile of rubble. Why is that?
Fell down.
Because those mighty walls
Fell down.
came down, and they've dug down to that level, and you can actually see the walls crumbled. You can see all the stone and everything just in heaps. You physically get to see that. So it's not something that you just read in Scripture, it's something that you can actually see for yourself. Now, what was Achan's problem? What had Abba Father told them not to do?
Take anything from the spoils.
To take anything for themselves. See, one of the things that he's trying to teach us too is we have to be careful with what you take from the world. When you take from the world, there's more than likely an attachment to it. What kind of attachment? What kind of attachment did Achan bring into the community because he did that?
Curse.
He brought a curse. Why was there a curse?
He told not to take anything that was given to another.
Okay,
idol.
that was the first, because he was disobedient. What's the second part of that?
Have been sacrificed to the gods or something?
That's right. Everything inside there had been what? Offered to the false gods, to idols. So it was what? It was unclean, but it was already cursed. The stuff, all the stuff that was inside that town was already cursed. So not only was he disobedient in bringing it into the tent, but he was also bringing the curse with it. So that's what I'm telling you. We have to be careful what we expose ourselves to out in the world, because not only are we being disobedient, but we're also bringing the curse in. See, the curse didn't come of its own will. The curse only entered the camp because he brought it in, right? Okay, so let's continue. Let's see why it's important to have Kavod.
The word glory is the word kavod in Hebrew, and is a difficult word to understand. There are at least 9 other words in Hebrew that can be translated glory, but kavod is the only one found in the book of Joshua. It is found in the ancient text more than twice as many times as all the other words for glory combined. It properly means weight, but it implies weight or heaviness in a good sense, and it can refer to splendor or honor. Kavod is first found in the Torah in the book of Genesis, chapter 31, verse 1, referring to the success of Jacob in the house of his father-in-law Laban. And he heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all his glory.
Or all this glory. So
All this glory.
because of Jacob's what?
Prosperity.
Yeah, his prosperity. Or another way of saying that is Jacob's what? Starts with a B, has an L, a couple of S's.
Blessing.
Because of Jacob's blessing, right? Now he started to acquire prosperity. Jacob was blessed, barakah. He was receiving barakah from the Father because he had been what? Well, he had been chosen, right? The other thing is, what did his father give him?
A blessing.
What kind of blessing did his father give him?
First son's blessing.
The first son's blessing. So what was he to receive as being receiving that blessing?
The inheritance.
double portion.
the double portion. So everyone in the family received an inheritance, but his inheritance was double everyone else's. Because to him would be the responsibility of taking care of his mom, taking care of his sisters, taking care of the family. So he was given the provision to do that. Well, he's not in his homeland, but now he's in his father-in-law's homeland. But Abba Father still does what?
What's the sense?
He honors the blessing. That's why blessings are so important. You know, one time when June and I started to understand blessing, I went to my dad at the ranch, and my mom was still alive at that time. And I asked my dad if we could receive his blessing. Now, he couldn't understand why or what so much. My mom did. My mom's eyes lit up right away when I asked for the blessing. So guess whose hand I got first? Right? But my dad did. He followed my mom's lead. So it's important that we bless or we give barakah to our children. And you can see that Abba Father honors that, because even when he was not in his own home, right, or his homeland, even under Laban's authority, he was still being blessed. Barakah was still coming upon him. To the point now that the glory that the father-in-law, because he was the head of the house, should have received, now seems to be passing to Jacob, right? Even his brother-in-laws are seeing something supernatural taking place. So in the process of doing that, when others from the outside see that blessing, now Jacob was smart enough to do what? To give the
Kavod.
to
Yeah.
Yah. He knew that it wasn't he himself. Remember, one of the times he had received a vision about the spotted sheep, and Abba Father gave him in this vision or dream, whatever it happened to be, what to do so that he could bless him. That's the other thing that we need to be careful of. Abba Father will usually give us hints or understanding so that his blessing can come upon us. See, Jacob still had to do what to receive his blessing?
So follow the
He had to
dream.
obey what Abba Father was showing him in the vision, right? So whenever the sheep would come, he would lay these sticks, right? Told him precisely what to do. And whenever the sheep or the goats would see the sticks in a line like that, right? In the process of them mating, now they would have spotted offspring. And all the spotted offspring, in the agreement that he had with his father-in-law, would belong to Jacob. So pretty soon what happened?
Big herd.
He started to get a lot of sheep and a lot of goats, right? More so than normal. So that's what the blessing will do, right? The barakah will do for us. It will set you aside. It will make way for you. We just have to be obedient and hear what Abba Father is trying to say to us. So let's continue.
Here, the word glory refers to all the riches Jacob had acquired at the expense of his relatives. There was an abundance or an immensity to his gain, a heaviness. What mystery might we discover in the ancient pictograph letters that would give us more understanding? Kavod is spelled Kaf, Beit, Vav, Dalet. Kaf is a picture of the palm of the hand and means to cover, to open, or allow. Beit is the picture of the tent and has the meaning of the house or the family, and is the first word in the Torah that identifies the son of Yah. Vav is pictured as an iron nail or a wooden peg and means to secure, to bind together, or to connect two things separated from one another. Dalet is the picture of the door and indicates a doorway, an entrance to life or death, or a place where changes take place.
One other thing that we could add to this definition is what?
Yeshua?
Yeshua said, I am the Dalit, right? I am the Dalit. So there's only one way to enter into the house of the Father, and that's through Messiah, Yeshua, the Dalit. Okay?
There are actually two separate mysteries found in the letters. One involves a covering, the other an uncovering of the hand. The first is that Yah will cover those in the family that have chosen to follow him in order to secure their pathway to life.
So let's say that for a second. So the first is that Yah will cover those in the family that have chosen to follow him in order to secure their pathway to life. Why does he do that?
Because he's the father.
Okay.
That's what Daddy does.
Right. But see, he's also honoring his covenant. And his covenant was, if you receive my son, if you receive the sacrifice that my son made, right, then you can enter in through the blood into my house. So this is really referring to what? Us receiving
Yeshua.
the blood of Yeshua. Us receiving what he did, the work he did on the cross. When he was on the cross, remember, he said, it is finished. So there's no other thing that needs to be done other than we need to receive it for ourselves. I can't receive it for you, you can't receive it for me, we can't receive it for our children. Each one of us individually has to receive it for ourselves. But when we do receive it, now through the covenant of the blood, right, we get to enter into the Father's house. Okay, so let's look at the second part.
We can find a good example of this in the second book of the Torah. In Exodus chapter 33, Moshe inquires of Yah in verse 18. And he said, I beseech thee, show me thy glory.
Show me thy
Kavod.
Kavod.
The Kavod of Yah here is Kavod.
Right.
In verse 20 through 23, Yah explains the problem with that and describes what he will do. And thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. And Yah said, Behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon a rock, and it shall come to pass, while my kavod passeth by, that I will put thee in a cliff of the rock, and I will cover thee with my hand while I pass by. And I will take away mine hand, and thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen.
So we see here the use of his hand, which we just read, right? So his hand is our covering or our protection, right? He was protecting Moshe, even from himself.
Yes.
See, Moshe was in no condition to receive him. If Moshe would have received the kavod, he would have died. The only two people so far that were born the only two people so far that were able to be in his kavod were who?
Elijah and Enoch.
No, I guess so. I hadn't thought of them. So the only four people, two other people in the Garden of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were able to be in his kavod because they were filled with his kavod, right? So they truly, and it must be something happened with Enoch and Elijah that they were able to, now what he did, maybe they're still covered with his hand, right? Just the same way Moshe was. Maybe they're under that protection. Because as far as we know, they still have their what?
Human body.
They still have their human bodies, and we know that from what we just read with Moshe, that human body can't stand to be in his presence. So they must be covered by his hand during this time. But we know that Adam and Eve were not covered. They were naked, right? So they walked in his kavod. They were covered in his kavod. As a matter of fact, if they would have remained that way, we would be that way. One day we will be that way. As a matter of fact, each one of us is on a journey to transform into that. Amen? Okay, next part.
The weight or the immensity of the kavod of the face of Yah is death to sinful man. So he covers Moshe with the kaf, the hand, to protect him and to provide a path to life. There is a second mystery to be discovered in the kaf, beit, vav, dalet, the letters of kavod. Instead of covering, we see Yah uncovering or allowing us into the family of the Son of Yah, who was secured by iron nails that resulted in a doorway to death for him, but life for us.
So stop for a second. So what did Yeshua have to do for us to have life? Yeah, he needed to die. In the process of his death, he brought us all life. See, it's the same in this where the analogy of the seed is. The seed has what inside it? Life. But it's covered by a hard shell. It will never do anything as long as it's in that hard shell. But it survives, right? They found seeds all the way from the time of Egypt that they've planted and actually grown plants. So that life inside the seed was protected. But it can't produce anything until what?
It's buried.
It's planted into the ground, and what happens to the hard shell? It breaks open. The moisture and being in the soil causes the hard shell to open up. And then what comes out? The life that was inside. And it's the same thing with Yeshua, right? Once his body passed through that transformation, now life was able to come into each one of us. Because up until that time, we were all destined for death. Which in Scripture means separation from the Father eternally. Right? Life means be with the Father eternally. Okay, continue.
The numbers these letters represent help us even more. Kaf is the number 20 and means redemption. Beit is the number 2 and stands for Yah, the Son, or the living Word. Vav is the number 6 and describes man's state of enmity with Yah. Dalet is the number 4 and refers to Yah's creative works or creation. In the Kavod of Yah, there will be redemption of both fallen man and the creation cursed by man's sin. It will happen through the work on the cross of the Son of Yah, Yeshua HaMashiach. In 2 Chronicles, we find one last insight into the Kavod of Yah. In chapter 7, verse 1, we read this account of the dedication of Solomon's temple. Now when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the kavod of Yah filled the house. Again, the word here is kavod. This is an interesting picture of something that takes place in the lives of the disciples of Yeshua after Yeshua returns to his Father. In the book of Acts, chapter 2, verse 2 through 4, as they are praying, this occurs. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, And it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them, and they were all filled with the Ruach HaKodesh. What just happened here, and how does this compare with the Kavod that filled Solomon's temple? Rabbi Paul explains this to us in the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 6, verse 19. What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Ruach HaKodesh, which is in you, which ye have of Yah, and ye are not your own? But the presence of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Kavod of Yah, now dwells in the bodies of those who have put their faith and trust in his Son. The Son who uncovered the pathway to life when he was secured to the cross. Achan could not give Yah Kavod because Achan had none to give. He could only recognize the Kavod of Yah. As it says in Psalm 29, verse 2, give unto Yah the Kavod due his name.
So how do we do that? By this example here that we read, how do we give Abba Father Kavod?
Follow Torah and be obedient.
Louder.
Follow Torah, be obedient.
Walk his way.
Very simple, right? The first part is you need to receive Yeshua. That's the beginning of your journey. Now the second part is to learn what's expected of us. Because now we all become his disciples. In order to become his disciples, now you need to learn. Correct? So that's what the process is. Once you get born again, once you receive the Ruach HaKodesh, now you need to start applying your mind and your heart into the process of transforming your life. Your life is not immediately transformed because you're born again, right? You started off as a baby. How many here changed your own diaper when you were a baby? None of us, right? You needed the help of an adult to do that. So it's the same process when you start off as a born-again believer. You're starting off with a diaper, and you need other people to help you to learn. But the baby eventually starts to grow to the point now that the baby grows to the point that it doesn't need a diaper. Now it knows how to go to the restroom itself, right? Because it learned. Amen? And that's what we need to do as born-again believers. We need to continue the process of learning how to be disciples of Yeshua. How do we become his kavod? How do we become something that gives him glory? Because it's your obedience and your lifestyle that give him glory, that give him kavod when you're out in the world. Correct? And it's your lack of obedience or what you do in the world that might turn you into a Achan, right? Where you bring what upon you? Curse, right? The curse can't come upon you of its own. It can only come upon you if you bring it. You have to bring it into your own dalit, through your own doorway.
Curse without a cause does not come.
Amen?
And so what you're saying is you need action of the soul, mind, will, and emotions.
All working together to serve as his disciple. Amen? Amen? We want to put on the Aaronic blessing without music, and we'll close. So I want to thank you for listening today. I hope that you are further along in your journey, in your walk. So our blessing is upon you this day, and we're going to leave with the Aaronic blessing. Yah bless you and keep you. Yah make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom.